Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, where today we are into the next episode on Back in Track, where we take a look at all the most of the vehicles that have been impacted by the recent minimum arm distance changes to ATGMs. Today we're looking at the BMP-1. The BMP-1 has always been slightly awkward to play because its standard round from the gun is heat, which at Era 2 can be very hit and miss because of all the spaced armor in Era 2. And the ATGMs, while it has ATGMs, they're not the strongest. And what makes the ATGM changes difficult to swallow with the from a BMP-1's point of view is the BMP-1 minimum arm distance now is 100 meters. The BMP-2 is 65, and personally I'd like to see the BMP-1 at 65 meters as well, because it's just difficult. It's difficult to play. You are a lower tier, you've got extra distance. It does feel like an unnecessary handicap to me, but it is what it is. It's at 100 meters, so let's talk about how you have to play the BMP-1. Well, the first thing to note is that the mobility of this vehicle does mean that you can play it like you always have. You can be quite aggressive with it. With the right crew and equipment setup, you can get the concealment down to a reasonable distance. I don't actually know what the distance is at the moment. I can put it on the screen. But you can be very sneaky in this thing. You've still got that going for you. So the play style from a scouting point of view is the same. Unfortunately, I missed that shot there. But from an aggression point of view, it is much different. And as you're seeing here, typically you would just smack the Scorpion 90 with an ATGM, but now you've got to use the heat rounds. And that's where the first difficulty comes in, really. From an aggression point of view, that's the first struggle. Well, in this case, the Scorpion 90 drove straight into the marsh, which slowed him. He lost all his speed. There he goes. But you've got to use the main armament. You've got to use the heat rounds that this thing comes with, and that means that means the shots that you're gonna be able to get away with, you've got to be a bit more calculated with your trigger. You can't just spam the front of tanks. Even if you aim for the weak spot or a known weak spot, you can't just spam the front of a vehicle, because chances are a heat round is just going to bounce, and it's not going to do what it needs to do. So in this game, I am very conscious of that, and what I do is I wait till the sides and rears of vehicles are exposed. Now, one good thing I can say about the heat round is that when it does penetrate, it does have good alpha, 320 alpha on the regular heat round, and that's nice. For this thing, when that round hits, it is very, very nice, because that's decent alpha for a light tank. And I'm trying to big this thing up. It's not an easy vehicle. No matter what I say, it's not easy. I mean, in this game, I've got plenty of space to run around, but the arm distance on the ATGM, I'm not going to lie to you guys, it's not easy. It's not easy. And the accuracy, the sigma, the moving accuracy of the gun means that it can be a challenge. Even at close range, it can be a challenge. And you've just got to be careful. And this is an example of where I am careful. The reload is very, very quick on this thing, which is nice. But I believe that was a Mag 3. That's got spaced armor. I was able to put a shot into the side of it. And, you know, in that sense, I think I got lucky. Sometimes those shots do bounce because there is spaced armor in Era 2. And what you're seeing me do here is this type of gameplay here. This is new for the vehicle. This is new for many vehicles. To guarantee an easier shot, I'd get closer. But we can't do that now. So I am deliberately driving wider circles around the targets. Well, simply because that's the only way I'm going to get damage. I mean, you can you know, accept the 300 damage you get from just firing an ATGM and hitting the target. That can be useful for getting kill shots, but now in this thing you've got to be a lot more conservative about your playstyle. You can't be as aggressive. You've got to be a lot more sensible about how you play this. You've got to be aware of how far away you are from the target. RDF, last tank in the game, so we go for the Ram. Not a bad game there. Not a bad game. 5 kills. Pretty good. 7,354 damage. So this looks good. And I'm not gonna say, like, I've already said this is a difficult tank to play, and it is a difficult tank to play. Not every game is going to be like this. And you'll notice the 2 games that I've chosen for this video where I demonstrate that it can still perform very well. They're both open maps. The minimum arm distance changes to the ATGMs requires distance. You're not going to have distance on every map. Mountain Pass is a very good example. You just don't have distance. Well, you do have distance, but you don't have consistent distance. On maps like Erlenberg here, you can play it in such a way where you can guarantee yourself that distance. For the most part, you can guarantee yourself that distance. So again, this is all about passive scouting, the way that you always would in these tanks. You know, you push forward to a location, you push a flank, which is exactly what I'm doing here. I'm actually quite surprised that none of their team came across the river at all. Unusual. Normally the enemy team is quite aggressive along this flank, but they haven't been. So I was surprised. At this point in the game, I was surprised, and I used the fact that there was nobody here to put shots in at range on the targets on the far side. So I can't remember what the first tank was. TR something, I think. Was it? I don't know. 120 again there. So you've got to be a lot more conservative with this thing. 100 meters doesn't sound like a lot, but on some of these maps, that is quite a long way in this game. Putting in long-range ATGMs to start the game off. 3,300 assist already, which is very useful, because you're not going to pull in the same direct damage. Potentially, you're not going to pull in the same direct damage as you did before. Again, the minimum arm distance is to blame for that. But at the moment, I would say I'm being slightly more passive than I normally would. Prior to the changes, I would likely have pushed across the river and put in closer range ATGMs. Not because I strictly needed to, not that the target would disappear or anything like that. It's more to do with guaranteeing the hit. The further your ATGM has to travel, the more likely and the more chances there are of, well, exactly what I've just mentioned, the target pulling back into cover, you driving into something and knocking your shot. You know, the longer you've got to wait for the missile to reach the target, the more chances there are of things going wrong. So at the start of this game, I was definitely more passive than I normally would be. Whereas, whoops, don't do that. Pay attention to where you're driving. But I was more passive. And at the moment, I didn't intend to be in this position. I didn't intend to drive into the river, and I didn't intend for this AMX to be this close to me. I wouldn't ordinarily, with the new changes, I wouldn't want this engagement because, well, I am relying on the heat round. Unfortunately, the AMX doesn't have the spaced armor. So, well, it's got the side skirt, so I suppose that's, you know, you could classify that as spaced armor. But on the whole, it doesn't have that spaced armor. But at the moment, with the way the game's going, I started slightly more passively, and then when I crossed the river, I switched into the traditional, more aggressive light tank role. And now, at this point in the game, I'm being fully aggressive. And that was an ATGM that just flew straight over my head from behind me. There it went. And in the game, I heard it when I was playing this. I heard that, but for whatever reason, I don't know why, I just thought, whatever. That is in fact it will be the remaining Rakuten on the enemy team. He was camping in, well, not camping, that's a bit harsh. He was playing K1 strategically, which is actually quite sensible because I drove around that area and didn't see him once. And here you're seeing a good example of why the gun can be so temperamental. 2 shots, 2 bounces, and there's not really a whole lot you can do about it. The secondary ammunition for the BMP-1 is also heat, so you've got no other choices. You've got to fire heat out of this thing. So, it is what it is. I now decide to turn around for the Rakuten, which I should have done from the beginning because, well, you know, that was an easier target. But he has somehow managed to put his foot to the floor, and he's made it all the way down to K8 without being seen. And I've covered the Rakuten already. It's a very difficult tank to play. I don't know why he pushed straight down into my teammates there. I would have still sat back in K1 personally, and, well, I would have relocated slightly, but I would have stayed there just to try and shoot the guys on the other end of the other side of the valley. But hey ho, it is what it is. So the BMP-1, the BMP-1, excuse me, is not easy, but it's not impossible. You've got to maintain. Well, I suppose, how can I put this? If previously, if 100% was, if 100% play style of this thing was how you used to play it, I would say in your head you need to dial it back to 85%, 90% of what you used to do. Just dial it back slightly and push to 100% when, like in this game, it was 13 versus 5. You can afford, you know, push it, you can dial it up to 100% there. But if we're making comparisons between the old versions of these tanks and their ATGMs and the new versions that we have now, I'd say the BMP-1 can be played the same way. You just got to dial it back slightly. So, wow, 99.8. I didn't realise that's how high I was. Maybe I could 4-mark it. I don't know. But there you go, guys. That's my take on the BMP-1. It's still good, but you've just got to dial your playstyle back ever so slightly. Just pull it back a little bit, and you'll be okay. All right, guys. That's all I've got for this video. If you've enjoyed it, please leave it a like, if not a dislike. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one.